Hello, everybody. Welcome to Making the Most of EdTech, smart school tested strategies that make a difference with Edina Public Schools with the help of Big Deal Media. Today, there are more digital devices available for education than ever before. Many of us have that needed technology, but we don't always know how or where it makes sense to use it in the classroom. In this webinar today, we've got some great panelists that will share how they're using their technology, unlocking really new creative ways to personalize learning, connecting students with really unique career pathway experiences and virtual internships, expanding access to global programs, and just basically simplifying life for teachers. We want you to come away with specific teacher tested strategies that you can use immediately. My name is Molly Schmidt, and I help market education products at Logitech. One of my favorite parts of my job is working with leading educators and helping bring their stories to life. Today, I have the honor of working with Andrew Beaton and Zach Horn to bring their stories to you. So I'll pass it over to Andrew so he can introduce himself.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Andy Beaton, and I am the principal at Edina High School. I'm actually finishing up my 20th year as a high school and middle school administrator. And then long before that, I was a social studies teacher at the high school level. So appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you and share our efforts in Edina Public Schools.
Zach?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Zach Horn, and I am a technical operations analyst in Edina. And that's basically a fancy way of I help teachers advocate for students' needs when it comes to audio visual needs.
Wonderful. Well, let's get started. So let's start out with a little background. Andy, can you tell us a little bit about Edina Public Schools?
Sure. Edina Public Schools is really located in the metro, very close to the metro and near Minneapolis. We're a first ring suburb of Minneapolis, for those of you that know the Minneapolis Twin Cities area. And it has been a school district that has been really kind of landlocked in many ways. Since it's close to the city, it's had turnover, I think, just with families that have aged out, a lot of rebuilds and really increasing property values in the community. It has been a school and school district that has been very family oriented in its history. It used to be a two high school district, and now it's a one high school district over time, but that was long ago. So in our school district, there are 10 schools, and we are a single high school district, the home of the Hornets. And this school district has had a lot of success in academics, in athletics, and fine arts. It's really very motivated, academically inclined student population, and a parent community that is very engaged and supports our schools. So we've done very well, and we continue to try to live up to those expectations that our community has for us, and they're very supportive at the same time. So enjoy working here.
Great. And Zach, what kind of technology do you currently use in your middle schools and high schools right now?
Currently, in our middle schools and high schools, we are rolling with a projector in the middle of the classroom, projecting to a projector screen. Some of the key features that we've been using as of late are we've been using webcams and document cameras in every single classroom. And we also have integrated some form of audio, and that kind of varies per room, per size. And we can get into details on that as we kind of go along.
Wonderful. And specifically with Logitech, what have you been using effectively?
Yeah, so with Logitech, we've used a couple of variants of the web camera. So we have some Logitech Brio cameras that are out and about. I like to call that in the wild. We also have rally bars in a number of our conference rooms, along with the Google Meetup, which is more of our um, portable camera, and it integrates really, really nicely with Google Meet, which we are a Google school. So it it's nice to have something that plays nice with that environment. And we also have Logitech headsets on almost every single staff member throughout the district.
Wonderful. Well, why don't we get into the meat of it now that we've learned a little bit more about Edina? So, Zach and Andy, there's been so much transformation around tech in education in the last few years. Can you tell us how you're thinking about technology and its influence on your students specifically?
Well, I think educators across the country and world have found that they've been doing technology integration, professional development, sort of on fire. This is not a It was not really an option. It wasn't something, hey, come to this webinar and learn about this. People, for straight survival and engagement and connection with students, had to learn things very much on the fly with what we've been working and dealing with over the last 2 years. So I think the acceleration of progress in the use of technology, whether that's through Google Meets or the use of some of the technology that we have used through Logitech, I think has become something now that we have returned to in person. Now it is something that we have added to our repertoire, and we have many more teachers, not just those early adopters, that have become more comfortable with using these kind of tools. So some of the things that we have done, in advance of going to digital learning is we have some flexible spaces. Our school is designed to allow students to work both independently, collaboratively. We even have classrooms that have nice sliding glass doors so students can work inside and outside the classroom. Teachers can divide their classrooms into, group A, B, and C and meet with small groups while two other groups are working outside of the space collaboratively. So sort of um, those ideas about how to personalize and bring greater connection and engagement to students, I think what's happening. Technology has only fostered that faster, I think, in some ways. So on a regular basis, those split groups where students could be listening to a recorded lecture that a teacher created out in a flexible space while a teacher works with kids in small groups on, let's say, math problems, and then you flip roles. So those things are happening, I think, on a faster basis because of that. Other things in terms of flexibility with technology, we have our teachers host office hours like college professors. We do that before and after school. But one of the things through technology that we have done more recently is teachers are starting to offer some of those office hours virtually in the evening. So we have an expectation of a certain amount of hours teachers have to host each week, but some of them have shifted those to the evening. Not all of them, but just for an opportunity for a student can jump on to a meeting like this as they're in the process of working on their pre-calculus homework, and that teacher would be available for them to be able to work through a problem. So, and this is obviously continuing to expand where we are now building an actual virtual pathway district-wide where students can choose to be online learners completely if that's something that has been successful for them. And you've seen that expansion across the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, that's incredible. Zach, talk to me a little bit about how the greater personalization and collaboration, what that looks like from your seat.
Yeah, from my seat, it's really cool to be on the outside looking in on watching these students grow and watching the teachers become more familiar with the technology in their room. Something that I've noticed the most is we have a high population of kiddos with deaf and hard of hearing needs. And something that's really really key for them is to be able to not only hear it in a better way, but to also have a live transcription. Um, and what the technology allows us to do is utilize Google Meet even in a classroom setting where a teacher has a microphone that can do live transcription into a Google Meet while they're teaching in person. That's just a real quick way for all students to feel included and to really work on that equity side of things. The other thing that I've noticed is there's tech tools that we need for certain type of coursework. I look at our English as a second language, our kiddos that really need that ability to hear things properly and then be able to practice. Um, so I get to see when I'm walking through these elementaries, middles, and high schools kids outside in the hallway working on their English speaking through a headset and recording, so the teachers are able to really help those kids, meet them where they're at, when they have to move on with other kiddos. And like Andy said, being able to break out into small groups has been huge for a lot of our staff and students.
Yeah, that's incredible. So now that we've taken a look at that student benefit, let's talk a little bit about the way that this has shifted for teachers in particular and how the teachers have worked.
I think from the same standpoint, this school has really tried to foster teamwork. Education is very challenging, and at this point, it really can't be done by yourself. You really need to be able to work with a team, and um, the ability of our teams to be able to work. Let's say in a small group, we have a group of chemistry teachers that are working together, but one of those teachers has to pick up their kids from a childcare standpoint, and they have the ability now to log on and participate in a meeting. Whether that is from home and bringing them in with a camera into a conference room where a team is meeting. So I think it again has fostered collaboration. We have done staff meetings virtually. We try to shift what the purpose is. So do we need to get everybody together in a room when we're doing more delivery of information? So we can do some of that through a virtual meeting. So it has expanded the opportunities, and many of our teachers have said they enjoy that opportunity. It saves them time. It saves them the opportunity from having to drive somewhere, walk to the other side of the building to participate in a meeting. And we've done that for full faculty meetings, to small groups, to sometimes even just our administrative team comes together on a quick meeting from our spots where we might be, and have people enjoy making those connections.
Absolutely. I think that's so important for social, emotional health of everybody in education. Zach, talk to me a little bit about the teacher collaboration and some benefits that you've seen.
Yeah, so I would say it extends beyond teachers, and it allows our tech team to be able to collaborate with teachers and learn a lot of this technology. I think that for so many people, technology can be a barrier. The challenge of getting things plugged in, all that good stuff. What I've noticed is while we shut down for the pandemic, we noticed that we were able to provide information quicker and more efficiently than when we were not. And we learned some things about ourselves, like how do we communicate more effectively with everyone and not just that particular few. Um, I think it allows teachers to step away from the classroom and talk about life as well. What I noticed is we have had multiple times where teachers just need to be human beings. We spend so much time focusing on teaching students, but sometimes we need to step away and we need to be people too. And I know that over at the high school, they hosted some trivia nights with teachers and students where they could just have some fun, where they could do those quick Minnesota sports trivias like all the playoff losses, and things like that. So I think the technology is really a catalyst, and it's not something that here in Edina we are 100% you have to use no matter what. It's really something that we use to invigorate students' learning and have the teachers be able to do so in a more convenient and doable way.
Yeah, that connection is so important. How has that lended itself to academic achievement? Like the sharing of documents. How are you guys using Google to further academic achievement?
Well, I would say that something like Google is used constantly from the standpoint of students collaborating on documents, teachers sharing information and resources to students, being able to provide feedback within that document, whether that's peer review or teacher review. I think almost all assignments that we have, major assignments, are turned in electronically now. You don't have that basket up on the desk for you to turn in that paper anywhere. Things are submitted to teachers again through electronic and digital platforms now. And it allows for teachers to do different kinds of feedback, whether that's comments, whether that's even digital uploads that they put in with video or audio comments that they put in for maybe feedback for a paper or an assignment. So the ability of kids to communicate using other tools where kids submit videos to be able to explain their understanding of something instead of just a traditional paper or test where they actually come on and communicate through a video that they upload. So it has really expanded sort of achievement and differentiation with assessment practices and instruction. You know, when we have teachers that are gone, I saw a student that was walking down the hall watching their teacher teach a class with their headphones in. A teacher that was absent today, you know, I asked who that was, and I got to see that teacher that was on that meet with students. So, and we can talk more about that later, but it has certainly expanded the opportunity for information for our kids.
Sure. You know, you mentioned something about teachers being able to trade students to share
Oh,
that expertise. Could you talk just a little bit more about that?
sure. I mean, that was something that we were doing, I think, before, even without technology. It's something that technology has just really fostered that idea. So let's say it's a similar when I said a teacher maybe takes a group of students and asks them to work independently outside the room while they work in small groups. That can happen within collaborative teams. So let's say that Zach and I are both English 10 teachers, and we might be partner teachers. So we could actually share students where some of Zach's students would come to my classroom and some of mine would go to Zach's classroom, depending on what we're working on. Maybe we had an assessment and we've determined that this group of students needs to work on this particular area of assessment and another group, another area. But sometimes we can do that also through a digital means as well. So if you can't physically trade students across the school, you could actually virtually trade those students where a student could come in terms of collaboration, in terms of the lectures. So let's say we have a team of English 10 teachers. Maybe one of the teachers creates the lecture on a particular topic. So they might be watching the lecture from one teacher and then working face to face with a different teacher in their classroom. So certainly the opportunity for alignment of our teachers and kids getting information and hearing it from different educators, I think is really positive.
No, it's very positive and definitely really highlights real world workplace activities and the way that the world works. No, definitely important. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what I think is just some really incredible things that Edina Public Schools is doing around interconnectivity and global views. You know, as a society, we are more interconnected. We're more global than ever before. And certainly, you know, education was running into some barriers on how do we do internships? How do we do study abroads? And I think Edina's done a really incredible job of a global connection. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the amazing things that you're doing to connect your students globally?
Yeah, it's part of our strategic plan. And it's part of the outline of an expectation of what an Edina graduate looks like, and part of that is having that interconnectivity around the world and having that global scholarship and experience. So whether that's through language that we have, but also just actual international experiences. One of the things that we fostered when I first came here is partnerships with schools in other countries, whether that's in France or South Korea, um, and and trips and opportunities that were tied to actual academic competencies. So we have shifted from um, trips that are tours to more actual educational opportunities where students do pre-work in advance of a trip. Like we had a group of students that traveled to Fiji one year, and they did advanced science-based biology work in advance of that trip for the course. They went on the trip and did field work when on the trip, and then they did work when they returned. So the shift with that is, how do you do that when A, you're not allowed to travel anymore, or B, thinking about things that are cost prohibitive. So that opportunity is not available necessarily to every student, even though you scholarship and do fundraising and so on. So I think in the digital world, you can have some of those experiences without actually having to get on a plane. And that's what we have done. So for example, our partnership with two schools in South Korea during the pandemic. Neither school is able to visit one another and take trips for either students or for teachers. But we still connected classrooms digitally to be able to foster friendships, to be able to talk about our experiences in those schools. And we're excited that we have some students from our sister school that are coming to Edina High School in the fall, because things are obviously getting better with the pandemic. So certainly has been something that we've needed to do to be able to continue with that. Another project that our seniors do is they do something called May Term. And so at the end of the year, we have students that can pick to do an independent study at the end of their senior year, kind of tied in either to a culminating project, kind of capstone project of something they've been studying over the course of their high school career. And often they do internships. And obviously during the pandemic, we had issues with hospitals they worked in, schools they worked in, where they didn't have outside visitors, or the bank or whatever that might be. But we were able to collaborate and find those opportunities digitally for kids, doing internships, connecting with people in those career-oriented fields. And then finally, the whole landscape about our school, because we have a very high percentage of our students that go on to post-secondary. College visits were cut off. More of that became something that we did through technology. Those counselors that came from other colleges, the University of Wisconsin, coming in through technology to be able to visit with kids, and kids be able to ask the questions like in this webinar format. All of the live streaming that we did from a counseling staff out to parents in the community that we did on a regular basis, our 11th grade night, our 12th grade night, things like that shifted to live stream opportunities like this, where you could actually create greater access for people to come. They didn't have to drive in. They didn't have to figure out who was going to take care of their kids. We have shifted those things with conferences. So we've had more online conferences than ever before, which again has increased access. No lines to wait in when you're waiting to come in and visit with your teacher for a conference. And it's been able to create more actually specialized appointments too, just for equity reasons, to be able to meet with those kids that you really need to. So I think it's been an accelerator of things that we want to do, and gives us greater opportunity to do many of these things related to increasing kids' competency about understanding their world.
Yeah, you've just done such a good job with that continuity and so many great best practices. I'm curious, how much of this do you think will stay relevant and the same if we ever get post-pandemic? You've done such a good job of really quickly pivoting to making sure that you're meeting all of these needs. Do you imagine that this is something that Edina Public Schools will continue?
Absolutely. I think that you could look at the Global Scholars program that we have here at Edina. We partner with our local Rotary, which is a service organization to foster kids who are doing a core concentration in either humanities, fine arts, STEM, a demonstration of competency in another language, and they also have to have some type of international experience to build towards a capstone project. So since we haven't had that opportunity for travel, it has been digital. There's a student that's doing a project because she has been connecting with teachers and students that are in special education in Haiti. So that would be an example. And doing meets like this, collaborating, actually having video conferences with both kids and teachers in Haiti. So certainly that was not accessible to a student to do that, or a student that is working with a pediatrician in Guatemala on women's health. So these are like real experiences where they're speaking to that doctor in Spanish. So the student that knows the Spanish language is connecting on women's health in Guatemala and creating a project on that. So not accessible without the ability to use technology.
Yeah, it's incredible. Zach, can you talk to me a little bit about how your role in technology has played a part in this?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate enough to get to work with all different programs throughout the schools. And really what I've noticed is I become a kind of the key master, you could say, of where a lot of doors are locked for students, and I think some people think that unlocking the door and opening it for those students is the way to go. But I really think just handing the student the key and letting them do the walkthrough on their own has been really, really important. Um, I get emails from students, I get emails from staff, just asking for help of like, what do you think, Zach? Um, which is really vital for me to stay connected and also kind of knowing what is coming. If we want to look at our future, we look at our kids, and the kids are going to tell us what they need. And what I've noticed is being able to provide these equitable opportunities for kids has really made students feel seen. I think so often, and we do come from an affluent school district where there is a lot of people that have the fiscal means to send kids overseas, but we also have kids that don't. And having a teacher core and an admin core that really focuses on all students has been just absolutely excellent to see. Um, and then being able to work with all different types of students has been really awesome. Um, I think that the tech is really making all of this possible. Uh, but really knowing how Edina works, we are not somebody who's just going to throw technology in just to throw it into a room. There is a lot of research and a lot of data that we collect to make sure that students and staff are getting what they need.
Yeah. How exactly are you collecting that data? Can you give us an example? I know there's certainly people on the call who would be interested in what something like that would look like.
Yeah, so we do it kind of two ways. We have subjective and objective data. So a lot of times we will send out a little quick survey to staff that are using, for me, it's very tech related. Obviously, I'm in the tech world. So I'll just send out an email and just say, hey, can you guys fill out this quick survey regarding the technology in your classroom? What do you think? What do you like? What do you need? What do you feel you need more training on? And that all pops in. Like Andy said, Google is kind of the heart of our school district. In Google Forms creates nice little quick forms and graphs for us to walk through and walk through as not only a tech team but also as a teaching and learning department to see where we can kind of cross some of that information. And we also use a Logitech has a program that kind of runs in the background of all most of their camera situations. So, like the rally bar, for example, when Andy plugs his computer into a rally bar, I can see that Andy connected to it and I can see how he's using it. Is he using it as a document camera? Is he using it as a speaker? So that really allows us to collect data very technology centric on what type of things are teachers using and what aren't they, because I think a lot of times as humans we think we're using things more than we are, or we're not using them as much as we think we are. So it's really nice to have that true data point that I always the technology and the data doesn't lie. When you plug in the camera, I get to see it. And the cool thing is I don't collect any personal data with that. It's really just what device is plugged into it and are they using the camera, the microphone, or the speaker, which is absolutely great to collect information.
Yeah. Zach, your job must have changed a lot in the last couple years. Do you think that you're anticipating new things within the next 12 months in a way that you maybe didn't even 6 months ago? What do you see your next school year looking like?
Yeah, I mean, definitely streaming has taken kind of a larger role. We have been streaming a ton more throughout the district, but I think my role is really becoming more and more student centric, of making sure students have what they need. Often, I think I would say 5 years ago when I started, it was very based on teaching teachers how to use the technology that are in their classroom. And we've kind of pivoted where teachers are actually teaching me how they're using technology in their classroom. And my job is just to facilitate the right technology in the right place. Um, and that's what I'm here for. I don't want to tell teachers how to teach with the technology they have. I just want to provide the opportunities they need and make sure that we choose the technology that's right for that fit.
Yeah. No, very important. Well, let's move on. I want to talk a little bit about the practical steps that you took to make these pathways possible. I know there's probably a lot of stories and a lot of things that worked, and maybe transversely a lot of things that didn't. Can we talk a little bit about that? Zach, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, I think the practicality behind what technology you choose in the classroom is super important. Um, and part of that starts with the data collection. Like Andy said earlier, that we have some early adopters that are our kind of go-to teachers when we're like, "Hey, we got this cool new toy. Do you want to try it?" But with that, those teachers also put on the lens of not every teacher uses tech like I do. What would most teachers use it for? So that's kind of where it starts, and that's kind of, I would say, our strategy is get it into the hands of people that want to try it, and then collect the information from them about how it could be used, and then share that on with more and more and more staff. Um, the thing that I am very, very keen on is ease of use and not having to train for more than a quick 5 minute like connection. Teachers don't have all the time in the world. Students don't have all the time in the world. So we need to make sure that we're effective in the time that we have and to choose technology that will be the same. Um, and that's why we have leaned on Logitech so much is a single cable connection for these teachers are awesome where anybody can walk into a room as long as there's a USB port on a device, which I can be honest, I don't know of any devices that don't. You can just plug it in and go. Um, and that has been a bigger impact for the dollars that we spent.
Yeah, Logitech has worked hard to, custom build products for education, certainly, and that ease of use and ease of implementation and lack of training is key to what we definitely try to do. Um, Andy, talk to me a little bit about how you've made this work. Specifically prioritizing learning, for example.
Well, I think ultimately, if people are out there and they are educators, whether they're a teacher on this call or a principal, constantly in the business of trying to solve problems and give kids greater access to learning. I mean, our job as administrators, although we don't always meet the mark, we do our best, is to remove barriers for teachers to be able to do their very best work, and for teachers to remove barriers for students so they can do their very best work. So um, we're constantly in a problem solving mode. You think about a student in a classroom that could be very high achieving and flying through the material and needing greater opportunity to go further and deeper. I'm in this human anatomy class and I am planning on going to medical school and I'm flying through this. And so, how can technology be used for someone to do extensions? How can technology be used for students to do this virtual simulation that they want to do in addition to the traditional work the rest of the class is doing? For students that are in the middle, or struggling, how do you engage students that maybe they learn best independently? They don't do very well sitting and listening to a lecture from their teacher. So a recorded lecture, and where they can stop and start and listen to it again and be able to do the problems that are on the screen without having to go as fast as the teacher is going in the classroom. So to be able to differentiate in that way. To the problem of a student who gets in a car accident and is out of school for a few weeks because their leg is broken and they can't come to school. And how do you gain access for that student that wants to keep up with their materials and not have to wait the 2 weeks until they can come back to school and be behind and try to play catch up with their teacher? How can they stay connected to the student that is having really mental health issues? And we're able to maybe differentiate about one classroom that they come face to face, another classroom that they're able to work independently and online for that particular class with modules that teachers have created. So, I mean, the sky is the limit in terms of our creativity about trying to meet the needs of all different kinds of learners. We don't always get it right, but certainly some of the tools that we have tried to establish is ultimately about prioritizing students being successful in their classrooms, being engaged, earning credits on their pathway to graduation, and kind of finding their pathways and passions. So I think it's just an accelerator of all the things that educators do to try to support students in schools.
Sure. Well, it's definitely an increased focus on the whole student in ways that we've never necessarily done before. So Edina's really done a beautiful job. Let's move on and talk a little bit about an example project. I know there's people on the webinar who are thinking, gosh, what would be an example of ways that you've used projects to really bring this out in students? So can you each share an example of a project that used technology in creative ways? I know you've mentioned a lot of examples, but maybe you could speak to that in a little bit more deeper way.
Sure. And I've talked a little bit about the Global Scholar, the capstone project that students have done. I talked about some of those projects that students are doing right now and our partner schools. So I'm going to talk about this one, this virtual sub piece in the middle, because let's get practical about the sub shortage that's there, and the fact that we initially started something called virtual subs here because on a daily basis, when a teacher was out sick or taking a personal day, we never could get all of our positions filled. And without a colleague covering, we needed a different pathway. And so what we determined, and again, for principals that are listening out there, most of the time when you have a sub that even is available, so I'm going to pick on Zach, and let's say that Zach is subbing in a Chinese classroom, okay, Chinese language classroom, which we teach here. I don't know if Zach speaks Chinese, but maybe not. So what Zach would do as that sub is come into the room and tell the kids, go online and see what the teacher created for you, watch the video, complete the assignments. So really it was a supervisory piece instead of teaching. So what we did is we just shifted that online on purpose. So in terms of virtual subs, kids now, when their teacher is gone, go to a designated space that's supervised, and they do online modules that the teacher has created for them. And that could be independently and asynchronous, but also because obviously out of COVID that has happened, we have teachers that might have COVID that are healthy, that want to teach their classes. And so they work live with their students. Second hour, we're coming on to this Google Meet. I happen to be in my house because I have to isolate, but all of you are coming to my pre-calculus class. And then I'm doing my regular lecture and conversation with all of you and doing groups in a virtual format like I would when we were online. But the kids are actually physically in school. So we've had to be adaptable to that. And that's something that we have done. Now, I will say that virtual subs, I think in combination with subs that are in the classroom is best instead of one complete thing out of the other, just in terms of volume. But it is something that I think was the creative solution first to deal with the sub shortage, and then as an opportunity really for students to learn more, in my opinion, than just a random sub coming into the classroom. Because something that we built tied to attendance, as we call it an ABA, is an attendance-based assignment. And basically their participation and completion of those assignments is the attendance for that particular class. Instead of just seeing Zach's face and marking him present, the actual learning and expectation is really the attendance for that particular online class for that day.
Yeah. Talk to me, because I keep hearing this focus on the teacher. So talk to me about how this kind of model has allowed you to nurture the whole teacher or retain really talented teachers.
Well, I think the retention of teachers, I think out of this, the last couple of years, I think has just been hard. It's been a lot of work. And I don't want to sugarcoat how challenging it has been over the last couple of years to keep kids engaged, to keep them connected. And then coming back to school, even in person this year, the reality of some students that had gaps in learning when they were away from us for a long period of time, depending on what was happening in their previous school, their middle school, things like that. So I don't want to sugarcoat the amount of effort that our teachers have had to do to fill some of those gaps. But I would say that it's again, technology can be an accelerator of things that are positive, but also can be something that creates volume for teachers in terms of too much. Everybody's inboxes get very full, and we wish we would do more face-to-face conversations sometimes, because those inbox gets full. But I can say the ability to connect. So something like conferences, I think, has been very validating for teachers to do online with parents, because they feel like it's private, it's intimate. They're also getting to know families and kids in a way that they can't when people are feeling rushed for this 10-minute conference and so on, where people are waiting in line and banging on the door to try to come and see the teacher. So those are something I think that has created more of the, interestingly enough, even though it's online, a little bit more humanity in a parent conversation. I do coffee with the principal, okay, and I do that pretty much bi-monthly. And I've been doing that since I got here, and it's just a networking opportunity with parents that come in the building to share what we're doing in the building and give them a tour. But since we were in the pandemic, that completely, all my coffees with the principal, you bring your own coffee, right? Because I wasn't providing the coffee when we were virtual. But now I do both. I do in-person coffee with the principal, and I just did a virtual coffee with the principal literally today with a group of parents that came in online, just like this, to be able to ask questions. It was actually mostly ninth grade parents, and they had lots of questions about different things in their ninth grade experience and getting involved and how things went and how they can communicate with teachers and post-secondary planning and all these questions they had. And it's also such a tremendous opportunity to network, because they said, what can we do for Edina High School? And I said, well, make sure you share the good news. Make sure you share on Facebook and next door when somebody's mad at the high school, that you say, hey, just call the principal. He's available. Ask your questions, things like that. So the ability to actually get into those people's kitchens or their workspaces when they're coming in. And one parent, I think, was meeting with their phone from their car parked. This is an opportunity for us to create greater connections. So I think for me and for teachers, I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we've talked a lot about academics. I love how you've bled this a little more into that personal connection. Can you talk to me about sports, extracurriculars, all of those things that make high school or middle school middle school? Do you have any examples on continuity there, how you've used tech to keep those activities going, even though students might not be able to be in school or audiences couldn't physically be at a concert, for example?
Well, we're lucky and we're fortunate that we are shifting back mostly to in person with those things like concerts. But yeah, for a period of time, Zach talked about the live streaming that we're doing of events. Um, Even the really incredible technology when we were completely shut down for a period of time, where our orchestra teachers were having kids record pieces of their parts, and he actually mixed them together to actually create ensemble pieces. I have no idea how he did that, but he would be one of those early adopters and say, hey, I want to try this tool, and I'd say, go for it, try it, and then share it with some other people that might want to utilize that. I think we do have some clubs and teams here that do meet virtually, so we have our traditional academic teams like Model UN, debate, speech, things like that. A lot of those teams did meet virtually. They competed virtually. Those things happened last year. We have some teams that continue to meet virtually, just affinity clubs, that it's easier for them to be able to meet virtually than be able to come necessarily after school because of transportation, but they want to be able to participate. So those are, again, an opportunity that didn't exist before. Then now it's a vehicle for teams to make a choice. And maybe this week we meet in person, but a different week we meet online.
Yeah, no, great example. Zach, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about this from your seat. Can you talk to me about how you had a part in an example project or something that you might have seen that was effective?
Yeah, something that I've been a part of and seen. I try to be behind the scenes and not seen most of the time. But one thing that I have found is there has always been a cry for live streaming activities throughout the school district. Um, and until we had the shutdown, it was one of those secondary thoughts of, well, it's going to cost a lot of money. It's really cost prohibitive. Can we do it? I don't know. And then once we started really exploring it and looking at other school districts, I have looked at a lot of the Dallas Fort Worth area, and they have always done a very good job of live streaming sports. And I always thought maybe it was because they had more fiscal means or something like that. And finally, I just reached out to a gentleman down there, and he goes, "We honestly just set up a webcam in our press box, plug it in, and stream to YouTube." And I was like, "That's it?" And he goes, "That's it." Um, so I think that the simplicity of that has been really eye opening. Something as simple as YouTube, now you can direct stream from any laptop. So if you have the ability to just plug in a webcam, you can take a laptop really anywhere that there's internet. And I've seen people, we have a coach that ends up going to a lot of places that does not have internet out at their football field. Um, he just whips out his phone and connects it to a hotspot and streams that way. So it's really creative ways that I get to see it used. Um, I know that we have been fortunate enough where we've outfitted a lot of our gyms with live stream cameras that are just always there. Um, and that has really helped all different types of sports be able to get their content to maybe grandmas and grandpas that aren't able to travel right now. Um, I've seen that is a really big player in the fine arts world. Um, there are so many people that want to watch kids sing, dance, play instruments, yet there's a big space limitation in most auditoriums. When you can only seat 6 to 1,200 and you have 1,500 people that want to come, what now? And for us, that what now became setting a rally camera right at our tech booth, pointing it directly at the stage and hitting stream. Um, it seems like something so simple that we should have thought of 5 to 10 years ago, but the pandemic really forced us to think outside the box and think simpler. Simpler rather than more complex is usually the way to go.
Yeah, I would agree. Talk to me. I love this networking, reaching out to a Dallas district. Talk to me about how you've had to network differently and maybe some ideas and ways people on the webinar might start to think about ways to do that.
Yeah, I think it starts with just having the confidence to reach out and say you don't know. Um, I was fortunate enough to have my prior supervisor always said, "If you don't know, ask," and there's no dumb questions. Now, for a while, I thought that, yeah, okay, but there might be. And what I've realized is we are an education institution. We are constantly asking our students to ask us questions. Yet, if we as staff members don't do it, how can we tell them to do that? So I just kind of took a leap of faith and I started doing some online YouTube searches of like high school athletic events. And I would click on the first one. And for some reason, the first one always seemed to be a Dallas Fort Worth football game, which makes sense because football is so big down there. Um, and then I just did a quick Google search of streaming the Dallas sports teams. And the first thing that came up was their AV integrator down there. And I just found his email contact on the school website and shot him an email. And I think that that is something that we kind of have an intrinsic fear of. If we don't know, how can we call ourselves the experts? And I would say it's okay to not know an answer. It's not okay to be too proud to ask. And just so anyone on this webinar knows, feel free to reach out and I can help you make those connections. I know that Molly is another great resource where, because she gets to talk to so many different people throughout, ask. I was fortunate enough to meet an esports kind of professional through Molly. We were talking about like, how do we get esports into the high school? And she was like, I actually know somebody that does esports. And I was like, let's get the contact info. And that's kind of how it took off. So ask questions, make connections, and you can meet somebody at a coffee shop even when you don't think you know.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so important. Andy, anything else you want to add before we head over to the Q&A?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, happy to answer some questions that have come up.
Good, good. So first of all, what additionally are you using across the Google technology?
Yeah, I mean, Andy could probably speak on it from a teacher's aspect, but I would say all things within the Google Workspace are free game for our teachers and students. Um, all the way from the Google Slides to Google Forms. Those are probably your kind of generic schooly type things. But the thing that I really encourage people to look at is within all of those Google apps, so Google Slides, Google Forms, Google Sheets, there is something called add-ons. And the add-ons have so many cool features that you can add. So one that I use on a daily basis in my role is an autocrat, which takes a spreadsheet and kicks it out into a Google Doc so you can have a spreadsheet of names. We actually used it for our virtual graduation in 2020, where I entered every senior's grade, the class that they were in, and all that good stuff in their pictures. And I hit go, and it made a Google slide deck for me. And it saved me about I laugh because Andy was one of the gracious people that got to reach out to me for that. And we were able to create a slide deck in 3 minutes that probably would have cost us about 6 to 10 hours of time. So those type of things that Google can do are insane. We also do a lot on Google Drive. Um, we save everything from our board meetings on Google Drive all the way to a student's quick note that they make in a class. So I would say don't be afraid to click on something within Google and give it a try.
What can you give us just a rough idea? I know you talked about some Rally cameras. I know you have a Scribe, which is a whiteboard camera. What would your average classroom across Edina Public Schools have, just as kind of table stakes in the classroom for technology?
Yeah, so there are four main things. We have some type of audio video device, which would be either a TV or a projector. I think that's pretty universal in most school districts. We have either a laptop or a desktop computer in each of our classrooms with HDMI connection. The key with that is HDMI connection is very vital in where technology is going. And then along with that, we have a webcam slash dot cam that we can use, because I always say if you have a webcam, you can always point it down and take a quick photo of a document. We don't need those big giant cameras with the big lights on them really anymore, which is kind of nice with kind of where technology has gone. But those three or four staples are kind of guaranteed in every classroom. We talk about middle schools and high schools a lot. In our elementary classrooms, we actually have interactive panels in each of our classrooms with the same backbone with HDMI cabling, a laptop or a tiny, we call them, but they're a desktop, and a webcam. And that's our standard kind of in every single classroom throughout Edina. And we do like to sprinkle in voice amplification where possible.
Okay, really, really helpful. I'm seeing some really important questions in the chat. And the one that I want to make sure we have time for is, what advice do you have for teachers that are struggling with tech fatigue? And I want to pose that to both Zach and Andy, because I think you're going to have probably very similar philosophies, but probably different examples. Andy, do you want to kick that one off?
Sure. I have tech fatigue sometimes. I will say that I've always had a philosophy is you work with people when people are in the building, and then you try to do your non-people stuff when people are out of the building. Sometimes that's harder. We're all kind of sometimes can get chained to our inbox and so on. But I will say from a tech piece, I think that the important thing to think about is technology should be an accelerator of high leverage teaching practices. It shouldn't be a replacement of those teaching practices. So, and sometimes those low tech strategies work just great. The mini whiteboards that you have in class. So we have cool desks where kids can actually write on their desks with whiteboard markers, and then everybody has a sock in their bag to wipe off their desk. These are school supplies, a whiteboard markers and a sock that you can clean off your desk when you do your math problem, for teachers to walk around and check for understanding, or to have them work on a problem collaboratively. So I think it's important to think about what is the best way to be able to deliver this material and have kids understand the material, have kids be able to have movement during the school day. I mean, nobody should be sitting at a desk all day. How do you have student voice in your classroom every period, every day, where you're asking questions? Nobody wants to sit for 6 hours and not have an opportunity to participate. And so how do you do those things that are best practices and calling on students directly? So again, not a replacement of all of those best practices, but certainly an accelerant. Um, how do you individualize? I want a conference with each of my kids individually, so now I can use technology to have these kids put their headphones in and watch this lecture while I call kids up one at a time to be able to go over where they stand on their research paper. So how do you do that? Technology allows you to leverage something like that. So um, I think to try to deal with tech fatigue is not feel like it has to be there every day. Close the laptop and put it in your backpack. We're not doing that today. We're going to do a four corner exercise where we have a discussion. This is low tech. Here's your whiteboard marker. So I mean, those things are perfectly acceptable and outstanding in classrooms. So that'd be my advice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's wrap this up. We're almost at the top of the hour, and this went way too fast. Um, what is the next problem on your list you want to solve with tech? What's on your wish list in general? Zach, I see a very big smile, so I will send it to you.
There, there are so many problems that come up, right? Um, I think the next problem is just that tech fatigue. We've had 2 years of being immersed in all things technology. And just to kind of wrap up my end of the how do you get rid of tech fatigue? Take a break when you're at home. Um, I noticed it with my kiddos. When you get home, it's okay to not be on your phone. It's okay to not do work when the workday's done. Take a break, go outside, get some fresh air, and relax because you've earned it.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, any thoughts on that?
Um, I think where we're going next, again, it's to think about different pathways for students. We're really having conversations about trying to have the high school experience be more of a pathways model instead of a pipeline. To have more choice, to have kids thinking about sort of a career major while they're in high school, to maybe have an expectation that 100% of your students have some type of post-secondary experience. And post-secondary doesn't mean it's a college level class. It could be a work experience. It could be a transition program, an internship. And so certainly technology creates a vehicle to be able to do that. If you don't have a car, if you can't travel, how do you make a connection to a career-oriented field in this format? So I do think there is opportunities with something that we'd like to do as a school to create more flexibility and opportunity that technology can help foster.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been such a great session. I see that there's a couple unanswered questions, and Zach has put his email address in the chat. So it's zach.horn, ZACH.horn, at edinaschools.org. And he's happy to address any questions that you have. Huge, huge thank you to Edina Public Schools, Andy, to you, and Zach. You're always such great partners for us, and you've got amazing things that you're doing, and it's just our pleasure to help amplify that. And thank you to Big Deal Media for helping us get this message out. Stay in touch with Logitech. You can always visit logitech.com/education, or please contact your local Logitech rep for more information. Thanks so much, everyone.